Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden, and we're going to look at the East Division midway through the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll start with maybe the most even matchup in these playoffs, which is knotted at 2 games apiece, the Penguins and the Islanders. New York head coach Barry Trotz said after starting Ilya Sorokin in Game 1, they would need both goalies to make a deep run. And he was right. Varlamov lost games 2 and 3, and Sorokin really saved this series so far for the Islanders with his stellar play. Now, on the other side, we've seen Penguins goalie Tristan Jarry run hot and cold in this series. Do you think the goaltending will be the deciding factor at the end of this series?
1,000% goaltending will be the deciding factor in this series. How many times have we seen teams lose over the last couple of series because a goaltender lets a muffin in from the sideboards or just in front of the net? It's tough to see. Brian Elliott, the Maple Leafs over the last couple of seasons, Frederik Andersen, even though I love him to death, he's let a couple of soft goals in, and you know, Cam Talbot for that matter as well. So there's a lot of your series depends on how well your goaltender's playing. And to me, I haven't really been a fan, and you know I haven't been a fan of Tristan Jarry all season long. He's allowed 4 goals in 3 of the 4 games so far, and he got one win. One of those, he got the win out of it when his team scored 5. So for me, I think Tristan Jarry, like you said, he's hot and cold right now, so I think he needs to be a lot better going into Game 5. And then Semyon Varlamov, I thought he actually played really great both games, but it just wasn't in the cards for him in that second game for Semyon Varlamov. But Sorokin's been the best goaltender in this series by far. A .929 save percentage in Game 1, a .967 save percentage in Game 4. He's been absolutely lights out, and he's stolen the crease probably from Semyon Varlamov heading into Game 5, and depending on what happens, probably Game 6. So I think the goaltending is definitely going to be the deciding factor in this, and who plays and who's stopping the pucks. Every single puck you need to be stopping right now, and you can't be letting those soft goals in. So 1,000% the goaltending is going to be a deciding factor.
Yeah, Tristan Jarry really needs to reward the Penguins' faith in him, letting Matt Murray walk, giving him the crease, giving him the chance to be that number 1 guy. Now is the time to prove it. Game 5 is a huge game for Tristan Jarry and the Penguins. Now, Sorokin, no question, he has been the best goalie in this series, but I don't think he's been the best player. Penguins superstar Sidney Crosby has been unbelievable in this series on both ends of the ice, making plays, stopping goals in the empty net. There was a couple diving plays he made to stop the Islanders from scoring on the empty cage. He's been really great offensively as well. The only thing is the Penguins' power play has been terrible. They've gone 1 for 8 in this series. Is Crosby's play enough to carry this team if they can't get that power play going?
Yeah, Sidney Crosby's played spectacular so far in this series, but to me, he only has 1 goal to show for it. So I think the Islanders are doing a pretty good job of containing him and, you know, trying to build real estate in his head like they did a couple of seasons ago when they made him leave the playoffs early in round 1. So I think this solely can't be on Sidney Crosby. I think this needs to be a collective effort from the Penguins. And we've seen how that acquisition of Jeff Carter has really stepped up for them. He's been lights out, scoring 12 goals since April 10th, I believe. So he's been a great addition for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But it can't solely be on Sidney Crosby, even though he is the captain and he is such a great player. They just have so many talented players on this roster now. I think that you need to start relying on other people and looking towards other people like a Jake Ensor or Brian Rust or Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, guys like that really need to step up in the playoffs right now. We've talked about how the Islanders have locked Sidney Crosby up in the regular season and in the past in the playoffs. They're doing a great job of that right now, so it can't solely be on Sidney Crosby.
Well, let's look at the East's other series between Boston and Washington. It's a lot closer than Boston's 3-1 series lead would indicate. The first 3 games in this series went to overtime, but after dropping Game 1, Boston has reeled off 3 straight victories, and Washington looks to be in some serious trouble after Boston's dominant 4-1 win in Game 4. Now, that victory gave Tuukka Rask 54 career playoff wins, moving him past achievers and into first in playoff victories in Bruins history. No surprise there. Rask has been one of the league's best goalies for years now. The Capitals, though, they have had all kinds of struggles in net. Vitek Vanacek was replaced by Craig Anderson after suffering a lower body injury in game 1. Anderson then allowed 4 goals in game 2. That gave way to Ilya Samsonov in game 3. Now, Samsonov played really well until overtime when he coughed up the puck behind his net in that second overtime to give Craig Smith a gift of a goal and end that game. That was one of the ugliest turnovers of the entire playoffs so far. And then Samsonov went ahead and allowed 4 more goals in game 4 with a really ugly save percentage. I don't know if you got all that. It seemed like I just mentioned 10 different goalies there, but are any of Washington's goalies good enough to complete a series comeback here?
I don't think they are. And don't get me wrong, I really do have a lot of love for Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek, but I just believe they're too young right now. We talked about this in the preview. I think going up against this Boston Bruins team, it was probably one of the worst matchups they could have had in the first round, just from the experience they get from Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak, if Halak had to come into the game. But both those goaltenders just have so much experience and so much veteran leadership in that crease. They own it. It's Tuukka Rask's crease, and that's why he's at the top of the leaderboard, like you mentioned. But I think obviously for the Washington Capitals, it's been hard for them. Vanacek goes down with injury in the first game. You have Craig Anderson come in, who's obviously he wins the game 1, but going to game 2, still a little bit of that rust was showing. And then Ilya Samsonov comes back for game 3, and he was on the COVID protocol. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the goaltending in Washington right now, but I just think when you look at the games, Rask has been playing spectacularly for the Boston Bruins. I honestly believe this couldn't have been a worse matchup for the Washington Capitals. And, it just, in that game 4, the Washington Capitals showed no effort. They were absolutely dominated from the Boston Bruins. And I picked Boston in 7 games. I think it's going to end a lot earlier than that.
Well, Boston has 11 players with 2 or more points. They're getting it done up and down the lineup. If you didn't look, I don't think anyone would know their leading scorer is Charlie McAvoy right now with 5 points. He's also tied for the team lead in plus minus at +3, and he's averaging almost 28 minutes a game. That's more than 5 minutes more than the next closest player on the Bruins. That's incredible. McAvoy did have a nice regular season with 30 points in 51 games, but he's hit a new level in these playoffs, and this is really a breakout performance from him. Are you sold on McAvoy as a number 1 defenseman on a cup contending team?
I am, and he's proven it right now. I've never really been the biggest Charlie McAvoy fan. He is a great defenseman for the Boston Bruins. I thought that in a couple of years he could have been that guy, but he's proving it to me a lot earlier than I expected it from him in this series. And the amount of time that he's playing in those crucial minutes for the Boston Bruins right now, especially obviously the first 3 games going to overtime, so you expect those young guys to be jumping on the ice a lot more than some of those veteran guys who are on the older side of things. But Charlie McAvoy's been flying on all cylinders. Like you said, 5 points, leading the Boston Bruins so far in this series. I think he's done a terrific job. He's confident on plays. He's confident with the puck and jumping in on the rush for any opportunity that's possible for an odd man rush, like a 3v2 or a 2v1. So he's not afraid to jump into the plays, which I love to see from the defensemen, so that they're active and, hopefully can get a drop pass and, just get pucks on net. Like, coach always says that get pucks on net. And he's looked confident, so he's looked terrific, and I'm sold on Charlie McAvoy now.
Absolutely. Boston really looks to be humming right now, and if McAvoy can keep this play up, it's going to be extremely difficult for Washington to come back in this series. But that's going to do it for today's episode. On behalf of Steel Road, and I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.